Did you guys grow up watching NeverEnding Story?
Yeah, with Atreyu?
Yeah, with Atreyu. Yeah. I mean, classic 80s fantasy movie. It came from a book, right? But when we were kids, all we knew was the movie Falcor. You know, him teaching his bullies a lesson, and they get thrown in the dumpster. You remember that whole thing?
I probably didn't watch it as much as you guys.
Man, we saw it all the time. Our babysitter, my mom sent us to a babysitter that's idea of babysitting was sit everybody in front of the TV and make them watch movies. And that's what we did all day. But we watched NeverEnding Story probably 50 times.
Jeez.
And it was just one of those classic 80s movies, the music, the way that was. Yeah. There's a cult following to that movie too, because I've watched YouTube breakdowns of the story, for years now, and people have dedicated their lives to this movie and breaking down what it means and everything. But Jake came across this YouTube channel who is a guy who is he's like a new age mystic, occultist now, but he comes from a Christian home, and his whole channel is based around basically trying to disprove Christianity and get people to awaken themselves, right? So he did this whole breakdown of NeverEnding Story and showing how the actual message of the movie, with a lot of evidence, and even from where the author wrote the book. And this is one of the things, before we get into it, I always heard when I would watch like the breakdowns and everything, that the author hated the movie. The guy who wrote the actual book, he hated the movie to the point where he sued them.
I heard a lot of people.
Yeah, he sued because they changed a lot of the narrative from what the book was, because the book actually is very much based on occult stuff. Okay. So we're going to go into a little bit of this breakdown and run through this a little bit. Can you pull this up, Mom? Take a look at this guy. Oh, Lord. Take a look at this. He looks like a character.
Everything I imagine he would be.
He looks like...
when I was editing this, my Jakey was like, why is he dressed like that?
Yeah. Look at look at his shirts.
Falcor.
He looks like he would be a character in NeverEnding Story. Okay.
Wizard.
If I told you this film was actually a coded initiation through hermetic magic, spiritual warfare, and literal Crowleyan occultism, and it all starts with a symbol you probably just thought was just a cool necklace. Remember the magical amulet called Orin that Atreyu wears? Two snakes, one light, one dark, intertwined in an endless loop. As a kid, you probably just thought, oh, cool necklace, but it's way more than that, because that symbol is a double Ouroboros. The Ouroboros is one of the oldest mystical symbols in existence. It represents eternity, cyclical rebirth, and the fusion of opposites.
Ouroboros is something that we've spoken on the podcast about before, and what it symbolizes.
It's everything and nothing, birth and death, destruction and creation, all wrapped into one. It's been used by alchemists, hermeticists, Gnostics, you name it, as the symbol of ultimate transformation. Now, in the NeverEnding Story, they don't just use one Ouroboros, they use two interlocking snakes, one dark, one light, reflecting each other, duality mirroring unity. Coincidence? Hell no. See, the NeverEnding Story is based on a German book, and Michael Ende, the author, was playing with some very serious esoteric fire. But it gets better. I bet you didn't know that there was a secret on the back of the Orin. Now, you wouldn't know this unless you read the book, but if you flip Orin over, you find something written on the back. The English translation of the book says, do what you wish. Now, the director of the film, Wolfgang Petersen, he wanted to soften it even more and tried to make it say, do what you dream. But here's where it gets mind-blowing. That inscription was originally written in German, and it doesn't say, do what you wish. It says, tu was du willst, which translates more accurately to, do what thou wilt. Wait, hold on. Now, where have we heard that before? Oh, right, that's the central law of an actual occult religion. Enter Aleister Crowley, the man dubbed the wickedest man in the world, founder of a religion called the Lima, and proud member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the secret society that birthed half of Western occult tradition.
Little Edward grew up in basically a cult. His parents weren't just Christians. Technically, they probably
this is talking about Aleister Crowley.
Right.
How he grew up.
The dude from
Flagrant, yeah. He has his own podcast. It's actually pretty good. It's called Camp Gagnon, and he does like breakdowns of. He did this whole episode on Aleister Crowley, which is why we're bringing it in, because he talks about his upbringing.
Just Christians. Technically, they probably identify as Christians, but they were members of the Plymouth Brethren. Think fire and brimstone. You're gonna go to hell forever and burn for eternity. Cranked up to 11.
So Crowley is from one of those super religious cults, kind of like your sister always says that's what you guys grew up in. She always tries to make it seem like this is what y'all were in.
Because they told not to wear pants.
Yeah, right.
Oh, Lord. Not that.
No dancing, no movies, no theater, no plays, no novels, no fun, basically. His father, old Edward Sr., was a traveling preacher who spent his days warning people about damnation. The family, they basically just like lived and breathed this apocalyptic Christianity, the kind where you're constantly waiting for the world to end at any given moment and kind of secretly hoping that it happens soon. But here's the thing about strict religious households is that they make sluts, right? I mean, like everyone that I know that's like just a sexual deviant group in a very repressive religious humping. The tighter the leash, the harder they pull, as they say. So, young Edward, he started to rebel. And when I mean rebel, I mean like literally the craziest rebellion you can imagine. His father died when he was 11, which only made things worse for young, Aleister Crowley. And by age 14, he was deliberately breaking every religious rule that he could think of. His mother, Emily, would find him experimenting with what he called impure thoughts, and generally acted like, the opposite of everything that she had tried to teach him. He'd masturbate while thinking about religious images, curse during prayers, and do basically anything to horrify his, hyper-religious mother. When she called him the beast, he didn't cry apologize or do anything. He almost embraced it and wore it like this badge of honor. His mother doubled down on the religious intensity, convinced that Satan was literally like possessing her kid. And the more she pushed religion.
I mean, she's not wrong. Judging by like what he was doing.
The harder he pushed back. So by the time he reached his late teens, Edward had decided that Christianity wasn't just wrong, but it was actively harmful. He started calling his mother a brainless bigot to her face and announced that he was changing his name.
Don't we hear that language a lot when they refer to Christians now?
From now on, he would be Aleister.
But again, like, she was in a cult.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't.
Right, exactly. But he just considered all Christianity
Right.
to be.
But
that.
I think this is like kind of what I was talking about earlier. Like, this is the theme of like, you go from one extreme to the next.
Yes,
Type thing.
right. Yeah, so little Edward became Aleister Crowley.
Crowley, spelled with a theatrical EI because it looked more mysterious and Celtic. It was his first real act of self-creation, right? Turning himself into someone completely different from the brethren boy that his parents tried to raise him to be. So by 1898, Crowley had left Cambridge without a degree, but with something a little more valuable, a mission, a clear sense of purpose. He saw religion as fake, morality as a cage, and normal life as dull. But what he really wanted was this truth, the spiritual truth, the kind that he thought, Christianity had buried under guilt and rules. And that's when he discovered the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. But if you thought this was just some regular old cult, you'd be wrong. The Golden Dawn taught a complex system of correspondences between colors, numbers, Hebrew letters, astrological symbols, magical operate, like all sorts of crazy stuff. And the students progressed through grades, learning increasingly advanced techniques for what they called spiritual development. Crowley mastered the material pretty quickly, but he also started pushing boundaries, once again, that made other members uncomfortable. The problem was that Crowley treated magic like an extreme sport, where other Golden Dawn members approached rituals with respect and reverence. Crowley just went full throttle, going crazy and like experimenting with drugs during the ceremonies, incorporating sexual elements that horrified the other magicians and all sorts of stuff. And the breaking point came in the 1900s, specifically 1900. Crowley had advanced quickly through the Golden Dawn's grading system, but when he tried to initiate himself into the highest level without proper authorization, the Order's leaders had had enough. And they kicked him out for being too chaotic, too experimental, and frankly, just too weird for the group of, these proper Victorian occultists. But being kicked from the Golden Dawn didn't slow him down. Now he was free to develop his own approach to magic without really anyone telling him what to do. He started traveling and mixing like Eastern philosophies with Western occultism and combinations that no one had ever tried. He studied yoga in India and practiced Buddhism and learned about Taoism and Taoist alchemy in China. But he wasn't trying to find himself. Crowley was learning techniques building towards something bigger. He also started to experiment seriously with drugs as like a spiritual tool. So at the time, opium, hash, cocaine, mescaline, all these substances were somewhat prevalent. I mean, I wouldn't say widespread, but you could find them. And it could alter your consciousness in a pretty significant way. And Crowley tried it in combination with magical rituals. He kept detailed reports of these experiments, treating his own mind as a lab for exploring these altered states of consciousness, decades before psychedelic research actually became respectable. And all of this led to the spring of 1904, when Crowley was in Cairo with his wife, Rose. They were honeymooning, but Crowley just, being Crowley, he also arranged to perform magical rituals in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid. At the time, it was much easier to get access to, these giant artifacts. So Rose, who normally showed little interest in her husband's little, occult hobby, started acting strangely. She began talking about Horus, the ancient Egyptian god, insisting that he was trying to communicate something important. And Crowley was skeptical at first, right? Rose didn't know anything about Egyptian mythology, but when she led him to a Cairo museum and pointed to a specific stela numbered 666, which, Crowley almost took like a cosmic joke about his, little nickname, that is when he started to pay attention. Rose told him that Horus wanted him to prepare for a revelation and that he should sit in his hotel room at noon for 3 consecutive days to receive a message. And what happened next changed everything. April 8th, 9th, and 10th in 1904, Crowley sat in his Cairo hotel room and claimed to receive a dictation from a preternatural intelligence calling itself AWAS. This wasn't a gentle spiritual whisper either. According to Crowley, AWAS spoke in a clear, authoritative voice that seemed to come from just over his left shoulder. The entity dictated exactly 220 verses over 3 days, creating the text that Crowley would call the Book of Law. The book claimed a new spiritual age had begun, the Aeon of Horus. It would replace Christianity's focus on guilt and self-denial with a new idea, with the central tenet being, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Not do whatever you want in a hedonistic sense, but discover your true will and follow it regardless of people, whatever people say. The book proclaimed that every person was like a star, a unique cosmic entity with its own perfect orbit that shouldn't be deflected by others, moral systems. And Crowley spent the rest of his life trying to understand what his spiritual message really meant. That's when he created a new belief system called Thelema. A Greek word means will. And it was basically a complete religion philosophy built around the Book of Law. Unlike Christianity, which teaches people to deny themselves and serve God, Thelema flipped the idea. It told people to figure out who they truly are and then fully live that truth. Instead of treating the body as something sinful, Thelema saw physical life as something holy. And rather than following rules from the outside sources like, churches or leaders or pastors or gurus, Thelemites were expected to become their own source of truth and guidance.
All right, you ready for things to get absolutely crazy?
All right, so what he doesn't go into, because I watched that whole episode of Aleister Crowley, he doesn't go into like the actual teachings in Thelema and like the Book of Law, and when he breaks down these ritualistic magic, like what to do, and how he actually talks about sodomizing young boys and things like that, and in his belief system.
Yeah, child
sacrifice, like all this crazy sexual ritual.
But yeah, and then he does later say that he didn't really mean that. He was trying to, it was code for like sexual acts, but
how do you?
But he says it in the book.
Yeah,
he says like something about like a young boy is like the best sacrifice or something like that. So yeah, he goes into some crazy stuff.
Yeah, Aleister Crowley was definitely into some dark stuff, and when you look at what he said, he was ushering in a new age, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it goes into all that.
But what I'm saying is like when you think about all the people that idolized him and that propped him up, they were a part of ushering in that age. And you see all those people that we were just making fun of, protesting.
Yes.
They come from
that age.
That age.
Yep.
They come from that ideology grabbing hold of the youth.
Do what thou wilt.
Do what
Even
thou
if
wilt.
it's on a lower level of just do what you want, which wasn't what he actually meant.
And you know what I was thinking too when I was thinking on this earlier, and I'm thinking do what thou wilt and how that took over that decade and that generation, mom's generation, like their mentality and what that ushered in ideologically to the masses. And then think about like what we've been talking about with hip hop culture and how hip hop has taken this dark, really, really dark turn and how it's become what it's become. And who ushered in that mentality through hip hop? Jay-Z, right?
Yeah, he used to wear his shirts and talk about him all the time.
Jay-Z definitely wore the Do What Thou Wilt shirt. There's a image of that people always use to claim Illuminati and all this stuff. But he was definitely dabbling in the occult when you see him with Marina Abramovich and a lot of the stuff that he was into right around the time when he met Beyonce too. And so think about that because that ideology really hadn't crept into black culture as much. You know what I mean? But now you see through hip hop it becoming more of a thing, but it's even more chaotic.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you saw a video of this guy, rapper, he recently became a Christian, and he was talking about, I forget his name, but he was talking about an experience he had.
No.
Like on a mountain in California where...
Oh, yeah. I did see
like
that.
Saying, like,
who was that?
You just gotta do some... He said you just gotta do some gay-ish.
Yeah.
And then they'll let you in.
He was talking about a photo shoot that he was doing.
Right.
And how he was in the Uber or he was in
he was in a car.
A car with somebody, some executive or something.
And then he got out the car because the guy like shape shifted in front of him.
Yeah.
Like just, and he's just a rapper.
Right.
I think he's from Atlanta.
Yeah.
Shapeshifting.
And they like offered him to, if you want to get in these doors, you got to do these things.
Right.
And those are the initiations. And a lot of this stuff came from Crowley.
Yeah.
And it goes into it. Like, not the Golden Dawn, but it's the next one, the O.T.O. That he followed. Like, he was doing stuff that he got on their radar because they're like, how do you know this stuff?
Yeah. So they made him an honorary member.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Made him head of the London. They're from Germany. It's funny. They're all from Germany. Like the Golden Dawn, the Illuminati was started in Germany.
The Bavarian Club is from Germany too. Yeah.
All these things started in Germany, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot of weird stuff going on there at the time. All right, let's keep going on this.
All right, you ready for things to get absolutely crazy here? Because Crowley claimed he channeled a non-human intelligence named Ivas, who dictated to him the Book of the Law, which is the sacred scripture of Thelema. In fact, this book is so fiery, it tells the reader to destroy it after reading. Obviously, I didn't follow the rules. And guess what the book says? Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Yeah, that line. The exact line is engraved into the soul of Thelema, the occult religion birthed by Aleister Crowley, and now it's on the back of the Orin in a children's book. Coincidence? Hell no. Now see, modern Satanists, edgy teenagers, and half of Tumblr often twist do what thou wilt into meaning do whatever you want, follow your pleasure, do what feels good. The occult version of YOLO. So is the NeverEnding Story telling kids to become hedonistic Satanists? Definitely not. See, Crowley's actual teaching is that do what thou wilt isn't about indulgence, it's about discovering your true will, your divine purpose, your soul's literal reason for existing. Not do whatever you want, but what your essence came here to do. And what does Michael Ende say about all this? He literally confirms it directly. Here's a quote from Ende himself. Do what you dream. This inscription is really the opposite of what the message of my book means. The sentence, Tu was du willst, originally came from English, namely by the writer Aleister Crowley. And there it says, do what thou wilt. All right, that's not speculation. That's the author saying it came from Crowley. And just in case you thought maybe he was unfamiliar with the source, no, Ende was into mysticism and reportedly even owned Thelemic material, including Crowley's works. This was very much deliberate.
So by 1905, Crowley had developed a theory that would have made his...
So I'm going back to this because now you're going to see what he was into. And so if this guy, the guy who
the
wrote
author
the
of
book,
NeverEnding Story,
like you got to understand what it means. Because when they're saying, it doesn't mean do what you want. It means
find out who you really are
inside of you. How do you find that out?
Right.
Well, this is where they're going to go into that.
Right.
Brethren and mother die of shock, probably. He believed that sexual climax was the most powerful magical force available to human beings. From
and with children.
his perspective, in the moment of orgasm, you are completely present. Your ego dissolves, and you experience something that feels transcendent.
Well,
for someone,
He wrote a book and he said that?
Yeah, Aleister Crowley, yeah.
And the book was published?
Yeah, dude.
There's nothing that, there's no evidence that he did anything with children.
Yeah.
So just a disclaimer. with that, but yeah, he wrote that.
He wrote it in the book.
Yeah.
feels transcendent.
Published
For
that?
someone convinced that consciousness could be expanded through ritual, this seemed like the obvious place to start experimenting. But this wasn't just about having like a good time and calling it spiritual. Crowley approached sex magic with the same systematic intensity he brought to everything else. He started to incorporate bodily fluids like semen and vaginal secretions and blood all into his magical rituals, believing that these contained concentrated life force that could power these supernatural operations.
Don't like the Tibetan Buddhists do stuff like that as well? When they do the sand mandalas and they do those rituals where they bury things in the ground, they do the same stuff. Yeah.
And also a lot of this stuff, just to make the connection, a lot of this stuff comes from the temple worship that happened before Christ. Like a lot of this stuff that happened in Rome, ancient Rome, and before that,
which came from Egypt.
Why
do you think he wanted to go to Egypt to do these rituals?
So these, and we talked about sex prostitutes on here, temple prostitutes, and so this is like he's bringing something back. Like, and he even says it like
he's resurrecting something.
He said Christianity tried to hide this or cover it up, but no, Christianity actually dealt with this in just being what it was, right? And the disciples who like all these practices were done away with because people held on to Christ, right? And then that stuff started to lose its power. But he's trying to bring that stuff back, and it's only because when believers, Christians, they're not led by the Holy Spirit, and they think that all you got to do is read the Bible, and and you got all these dead churches out there. Well, then something is going to go into what's dead. It's not going to just stay that way. When you are not occupying, something else is going to
come in. Yeah.
So this is what churches become dead because you become very legalistic, because you're trying to prove yourself, because you're not a son anymore. You're an orphan because you lack the Spirit of God. So now, if you lack the Spirit of God, well, then there's going to be another spirit that's going to try to come in when that spirit is no longer there. Because you can't have a Holy Spirit and an unclean spirit in the same place. You can't have the Holy Spirit and an unclean spirit in the same place.
And he would perform these elaborate ceremonies where sexual acts became offerings to these Egyptian gods, with every climax, carefully directed towards these magical goals. His lovers weren't just partners. They became what he called scarlet women, named after the whore of Babylon from Revelation. In Crowley's theology, these women embodied divine chaos and creative destruction. They were goddesses incarnate. Having sex with them was literally communing with the sacred feminine. Rose, his wife, the first scarlet woman, but Crowley being Crowley, of course, monogamy wasn't going to contain his spiritual ambitions for a long time. Now remember, the sex wasn't separate from the magic. It was the magic. Crowley would design these elaborate ceremonies where these sexual positions corresponded with different planets and their influence, and the timing of climax aligned with the astrological events, and every fluid was collected and used in these follow-up rituals. It was this whole thing, right? So by 1912, Crowley's experiments caught the attention of Theodor Roos, the head of the German occult organization called the Ordo Templi Orientis, also known as O.T.O. Roos had heard rumors about Crowley's sex magic techniques and was convinced that he had independently rediscovered ancient secrets that the O.T.O. claimed to preserve. He initiated Crowley into the order and eventually made him the head of the British branch. And this was perfect for Crowley, a group he could take over and mold to fit his own ideas. The O.T.O. had started out kind of like almost like a mystical, or like a more mystical version of Freemasonry, full of these rituals and ranks you had to move through. But once Crowley was in charge, he pushed it way further. He rewrote the rituals to include real sex acts, treating them as these tools for magic. What used to be symbolic ceremonies became actual physical rituals meant to create real power.
In the book, there's a lion called Grogramen, a symbol of higher wisdom, and he literally gets pissed at Bastian for thinking it means do what you want. And Michael Ende lays it all out crystal clear. The do what you dream is the wrong interpretation. It is precisely this error Bastian is subject to, and why he cannot find his way back from Fantastica. He also thinks at first that it's about doing what he wishes, longs for, wants to do. The lion Grogramen gets angry when Bastian tells him this interpretation. To find one's true will does not at all mean doing what one wants. All right, whoa, hold on right there, because he just dropped another occult theme central to Thelema. Find one's true will? Well, what's the true will? Michael Ende writes that it's your own deepest secret and you yourself don't know it. See, one of the core purposes of Thelema is to discover your true will. Aleister Crowley wrote, a man who is doing his true will has the inertia of the universe to assist. And
at the top of Crowley's version.
So he said it's your own deepest secret. And then this next part is kind of going to go into like what that actually means. How do you find your will?
Right.
Of the O.T.O., things got even more intense. He introduced what he called the supreme secret, a specific sexual technique that, according to him, could create powerful magical energy and lead to these even greater supernatural results. And this wasn't just talk. He gave detailed instructions on how to use, masturbation, oral sex, intercourse, and all, different forms of sexual activity as actual prayer or like spiritual practice. And it wasn't optional. Members were expected to try these methods and report back what happened. Crowley believed that he was bringing back something ancient that Christianity tried to get rid of. And he thought the early Christians had purposely buried these ideas of sex magic, which, led to centuries of shame and repression around it. In his view, sex wasn't sinful, it was spiritual. His O.T.O. rituals were meant to fix the divide between body and soul, and by, making people think that the bedroom was almost like a temple, and that, every climax was a connection with the divine.
want to know something even more shocking? Michael Ende hated the movie. He was so angry about about the changes to his story, including the way this core teaching was flattened or misunderstood, that he actually sued the producers and tried to shut down the film's release. He even demanded that his name be removed from the opening credits. But the movie left just enough of his original message in place that the occult initiation is still visible if you know what to look for. But if you thought that was crazy, buckle up. See, at the end of the NeverEnding Story, there's this very climactic moment where lightning is crashing, the world's falling apart, Fantasia's literally dying, and Bastian is told the only way to save it is to give the Empress a new name.
Call my name!
Now, doesn't that seem kind of strange? Well, what does he do? He runs to the window and screams something into the storm. And
Never knew.
I never.
Never knew what that was saying.
You remember that scene?
Yes.
You could never understood what he said, right?
What did
No.
he say?
He said Moonchild.
Because I couldn't even understand.
And as a kid, I never knew what he said. It wasn't until, again, when YouTube came about and I was looking at breakdowns of the movie and they talk, but it's in the book.
By the
I never
way,
read the book.
I was always confused about Atreyu because he had such a girly.
He
voice.
always, yeah, and
So-
he was very ambiguous.
Yeah, that was another weird thing. To
Yeah.
me. That always seemed weird.
Yeah.
As a kid.
Yeah. And then when I found out it was Moonchild, I'm like, why would that be the name that he picked?
And
And that
she
was
was
his mom's
weird.
name because he gave her the name of his mother.
Yeah.
Who had died in the beginning. When in the beginning of the film, his mom was dead, which is why he had like this weird relationship with his dad, which is
Yeah.
why he escaped to read these books
Right.
instead of going to school. No one even talk about why this little boy is never in school, and
Yeah.
like nobody said that. Like he literally spent the entire night reading this book.
Yeah.
Nobody went looking for him. The police wasn't called. Like,
But wasn't she weird looking to you? Like
she was always creepy to
she
me.
was always creepy.
The princess.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I always felt like she was creepy.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that little. You know, that was her first acting job. That little girl.
Really?
Yeah, she never acted before.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
every kid watching went, wait, what did he just say? Because the audio is very garbled, it's unclear. But what he actually said is in the script and in the book. He shouts, Moonchild. I'm sorry, what? Why on earth would a grieving little boy name the savior of a collapsing fantasy realm Moonchild? Well, here's the shocker, because Moonchild is the name of a 1923 occult novel written by, you guessed it, Aleister Crowley. And in Crowley's story, a Moonchild is a magical being prophesied to be born from a spiritual war, a literal divine avatar meant to usher in a new eon, which is a new phase of reality. Moonchild isn't just the title of Crowley's book, it's also the centerpiece of one of the most insane real-life occult rituals ever recorded, the Babylon Working.
So in the story of NeverEnding Story, remember, like the Nothing was coming and destroying Fantasia, and Sebastian's reading this book, and she says the only one that can save it is talking to him, like breaking that fourth wall and showing him that he's actually a part of the story. And she says, "Say my name. You have to say my name." And then he says the name Moonchild.
he's like, "Is it really me?
Yeah, yeah.
Am I the one?" Like,
Right,
this is the
right.
He's talking to himself.
Yeah. And then he says Moonchild, but then there's only thing left is this one grain of sand. And she tells him that he can rebuild Fantasia, this new reality, from his wishes or from his will, right? Mm-hmm. It's very much what this dude is breaking down. It's real, this esoteric like ideology that was kind of threaded through this movie that we were taking in the 80s as kids and didn't realize. Mm-hmm. But yeah, let's keep
All right, let me explain this madness. In 1946, in the goddamn Mojave Desert, a rocket scientist named Jack Parsons.
We've talked about this on here, how he was an Aleister Crowley follower.
He discovered Crowley's work in the 1930s and became convinced that magical rituals could literally contact alien intelligence. And Parsons wasn't just dabbling in the cult. He was a serious scientist. Like, that was his job. He helped pioneer rocket propulsions at Caltech, co-founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and developed solid fuel tech that NASA still relies on today.
So he teamed up with L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, and
How
said,
is
you know what would
that
be fun? A full-blown
so
magic
cool?
ritual to summon the goddess Babylon and manifest a Moonchild into the world. I mean, seriously, think about this. The guy who helped invent rocket fuel, who literally helped us get to the moon, tried to conjure a divine feminine messiah using thelemic rituals with the man who would later start the world's most litigious UFO-themed religion. This actually happened, like historically, documented.
And there was something even stranger. Some theorists believe that the rituals Parsons and Hubbard performed didn't just mess with their personal lives. They maybe, or literally, opened a doorway, a portal, they claim, that let extraterrestrial entities start interacting with humans more often. Whether that's wild speculation or not, one thing is clear, that the late 1940s was the start of modern UFO culture. And strangely enough, many of those early alien encounter stories sound a lot like the visions and experiences Crowley had been writing about for years, beings of light and symbols and messages from beyond.
Didn't Crowley he was said to have been contacted or like brought through a portal with some being,
Well, yeah.
Lamb?
Both the first one, Iowa, but then Lamb was later on.
Lamb was the one that looked
I
like
didn't put that in
a
here.
gray alien.
Yeah, but
And-
he looked like a
and it was the first depiction of that type of phenotype
yeah.
that we've ever seen was Aleister Crowley's, which ended up becoming like the gray alien.
Yeah, and I think that's why I left this in here, because the connection to like look at what's coming up now. Look at how like they're even talking
Aliens now again,
alien.
yeah.
There's like an alien ship.
Supposed to be approaching.
Yeah, like they're setting things up
Right.
in a way that a lot of people aren't going to be able to even understand because it's outside of your paradigm
Right.
in terms of even Christians, like in terms of how you view things. A lot of people don't understand the sons of God. A lot of people don't even know Deuteronomy 32.
Yeah.
Like these people don't know this stuff because especially in a Western civilization,
Yeah.
Christian America, it's so like people don't talk about majority, don't talk about the spiritual realm, right? So a lot of this stuff. Now, think about it. If even this, like, if we can't go through this and deal with it, because I know a lot of it is like nasty and you're hearing this crazy stuff.
It sounds
but
gross.
you got to be able to deal with it so that you can know what you're up against,
yeah.
right? So that you can have an understanding. I think a lot of people just be like, "Oh, I don't even want to."
Yeah.
But you become victims if you don't know. Like, we got to be able to be like, okay, I get it, but God is greater.
Right.
How is God greater?
And we also have to be aware of like the things that we led into our hearts as kids that we were indoctrinated by, like, and then so that way you can undo those entanglements, to use a term from Jada Pinkett Smith.
Because these things didn't just happen; they
Right.
were, like this happened in the fort, like this
Right.
whole Jack Parsons.
Right.
Well, Aleister Crowley started this stuff before the 1900s,
Right.
into the 1900s,
which influenced them, which then
Yeah.
influenced the 60s, which
Yeah.
then influenced, hip hop, which then influences now.
And it didn't just like it influenced the stuff he did influenced mind control stuff.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, like
MK Ultra. Yeah.
psychology, like
Right.
a lot of this stuff, it influenced the whole culture.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important that we pay attention to this stuff.
But there's another secret here, because in Thelema, Crowley wrote that we were entering a new phase of existence called the Aeon of Horus, aka the age of the crowned and conquering child, a divine archetype of the sovereign self, unchained from external authority, not bound by dogma or old religion, the child who rules by self-determination. Crowley wrote, for the whole universe and all that in it is, what is it but the infinite playground of the crowned and conquering child, of the insatiable, the innocent, the ever-rejoicing heir of space and eternity. So think about this. Is it a coincidence that the savior of Fantasia is literally called the childlike empress, whose name ushers in a new phase of existence in Fantasia, which is the infinite playground of human imagination? Because the core message of the NeverEnding Story is this: imagination creates reality, period. This isn't just about reading books or believing in yourself. This is a coded crash course in occult manifestation magic. And what is magic? Aleister Crowley defined it like this: magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. And that's exactly what happens in the movie. Fantasia is literally powered by human dreams. It exists because people imagine. And the terrifying force that's consuming it, it's called the nothing. As one character says, people have begun to lose their hopes and forget their dreams, so the nothing grows stronger. The nothing is what happens when the human spirit collapses, when imagination dies, when the creative spark is totally snuffed out. And here's where it gets dangerously powerful, because the only person who can stop the nothing is a child in the real world.
You simply can't imagine that one little boy could be that important.
See, at the end of the film, after everything's been destroyed, the Empress, now reborn as Moonchild, yeah, we're still not over that one, she gives Bastian a single grain of sand, the last fragment of the universe, and she tells him, Fantasia can rise anew from your dreams and wishes, Bastian.
Fantasia can arise in you. From your dreams and wishes, Bastian.
She says he can have as many wishes as he wants, and that the more wishes you make, the more magnificent Fantasia will become.
And the more wishes you make, the more magnificent Fantasia will become.
All right, think about that. This kid's will and imagination literally rebuilds the universe. That is straight up Hermetic creation magic. The NeverEnding Story echoes the principle, as above, so below, as within, so without, which means the inner world, mind and spirit, can shape the outer material world. In fact, as above, so below is embedded within the Orin itself. The light and dark serpents represent the intertwining of the human world and the world of Fantasia, or the outer and the inner. Right, it's basically telling us that we're all magicians at heart, co-creating the world with our thoughts and will. And the movie doesn't even try to hide the stakes. It straight up reveals a full-blown occult war happening right now between our power to set ourselves free versus the forces that want to control us. In one of the most terrifying exchanges, the wolf-like villain called Gmork confronts Atreyu and basically monologues about his evil plan. Gmork says, I am the servant of the power behind the nothing. In the book, it's revealed he works for mysterious beings called the manipulators. And why help the nothing? Gmork says, because people who have no hopes are easy to control, and whoever has the control has the power. Seriously, a Wolf in a So-Called Kids movie just laid out the entire blueprint for authoritarian control, fascism, and spiritual enslavement. And most of us never noticed, but as
You
adults...
hear it though?
What?
Fascism, spiritual
Help
enslavement.
the nothing? Gmork says, because people
listen
who
to
have
it.
no hopes are easy to control, and whoever has the control has the power. Seriously, a Wolf in a So-Called Kids movie just laid out the entire blueprint for authoritarian control, fascism, and spiritual enslavement. And most of us never noticed, but as adults, that line should hit like a freight train. People who have no hopes are easy to control. This is the real occult war being revealed in plain sight, right there in a kid's film. Because on one side, you have those who want you to awaken.
What did we
to
just see with all those people in that 20v1 with Patrick Bet David? A bunch of people with no hope.
Yep.
They are giving themselves over to authoritarian ideas.
Yeah. Why? Because they're so focused on their flesh. They're so focused.
Their will.
You think about it. Why do we become like? And just think about like people who are we're dead in what? Spirit, right? So if we're dead in spirit, we're children of wrath, right? I'm saying if we're not believers, when we're believers, now we're dealing with the Holy Spirit. We have to be led by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Right? If we are led by thinking that we can read the Bible and think that we have to read the Bible. I'm saying just read the Bible. We're gonna start to. We're still children of wrath. We're living from the Bible. So now we become, because what does the Bible do? It shows us. It gives us a mirror, right? And we realize we are not enough. We can't live up. We can't measure up, right? And without God, without the Holy Spirit, we become tormented. Because not only are we going to think it, who's giving us those thoughts?
Yeah.
So now we're going to be tormented and feel shame, right? And now, how do we deal with that? We got to prove to ourselves that we're not that. And in order to do that, we got to compare ourselves to everybody else. So now that's how we deal with each other. And it's not just, I'm just showing it to you like religiously how this can happen, but it also happens with people who are just going through life.
Yeah.
Because now we're just measuring up based off of your own laws, how you see it. You might never read the Bible, but you've been given laws, whether it's what you've gone into or how you grew up in your life, right? The culture you live in, you've been given these laws that you don't even realize you abide by. You know, you grow up in the streets, they call it the code of the streets, whatever. There's always laws that you're gonna live by. But the problem is you're always gonna measure yourself and you're gonna fall short. And now you have to prove yourself, right? And they're saying that freedom from this is through spiritual practices like Crowley. And that's the thing that this guy with the crazy hair and he's not saying the deeper thing, and that's why I went to the other guy. I don't know his name. What's his name?
Mark Gagnon.
Yeah, where he's like going into, well, how Crowley do this? It's through sexual stuff.
Right. This guy didn't want to touch.
He didn't want to say none of that.
Right.
But how do you find yourself? How are you coming? How are you breaking free? This child. What do they call it?
The crown.
The
child.
crown child.
Yeah.
Like, how do you be a conquering child?
Yeah.
How do you conquer your so-called flesh? Not like the Christians.
Right.
You don't give your life to Jesus.
Right.
You have to do spiritual practices and spiritual workings to manifest yourself.
Which are literally giving yourself completely over to all of your desire.
Yeah.
Instead of conquering your flesh in the way of like, my flesh won't control me, I overcome. Yeah. It's crazy. All right, let's
For your true will to create, to imagine, to manifest dreams into reality, to become what you really are. But on the other side, you have the people who want your mind empty. They want you passive, docile, distracted, numbed by entertainment, paralyzed by fear, buried under mountains of propaganda, drowning in self-doubt, and starved of meaning. They don't want you dreaming. They want you scrolling, consuming, obeying, forgetting. They want your inner fire totally snuffed out into nothing so they can rule over the action.
At the same time, intelligence agencies were working quietly and studying his techniques too, not for spirituality, but for their own potential and psychological warfare, interrogation, and mind control. Think about the operations such as MK which would use LSD in the attempt to mind control people to do things against their will. So once again, Crowley's legacy was slipping into science, culture, and even espionage. So Crowley dies in 47, but his name does not die with him. By the 1960s, counterculture was like rocket fuel for Crowley's posthumous reputation. Suddenly, a generation of young people that was rejecting the conventional religious experience started experimenting with psychedelic drugs and embracing sexual liberation. What does this sound like? Sounds a little like Aleister Crowley. And they basically began doing everything that Crowley had been preaching since 1904. His motto, Do As Thou Wilt, became the unofficial slogan for the hippie movement in the 60s, even though most of the kids chanting it had no idea where it came from. But the real breakthrough came when rock musicians started discovering his work. These weren't casual fans. Major artists became genuinely obsessed with Crowley's magical philosophy and started incorporating it into their music and personas. I mean, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin was probably the most serious Crowley devotee in rock history. In 1970, Page actually bought Crowley's former mansion, the Olskine house on the shores of Loch Ness in Scotland. This wasn't just, celebrity real estate purchase. Page was convinced that the house retained magical energy from Crowley's rituals and wanted to tap into that power for his own creative work.
Wasn't Led Zeppelin like doing rituals over their records too, like their master recordings? I remember hearing something about that.
But the moment that truly pushed Crowley into the mainstream, of pop culture came in 1967 when the Beatles featured his face on the iconic cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, one of the great albums of all time. And there he is, second from the left on the very top row, surrounded by other cultural icons the band wanted to honor. Paul McCartney later explained that it chose people who had shaped their worldview, and Crowley's rebellious philosophy about breaking free from societal norms clearly struck a chord. It was a subtle nod, but one that introduced millions to the great beast without ever saying a word. Now, think for a second. The most popular band in history put the face of the wickedest man in the world on their most famous album cover. Teenagers who had never heard of occultism or Thelema were suddenly staring at Crowley's image every time they played their favorite record. David Bowie, as a matter of fact, took it farther than most. He didn't just reference Crowley, he tapped into his...
David Bowie, who also starred in The Labyrinth, which is another occult movie from that same era.
His ideas, things like transformation, identity, treating life as this type of art project where, these are fundamental ideas central to both men. With characters like Ziggy Stardust and then, Thin White Duke, Bowie constantly reinvents himself, almost like Crowley's magical personas. For Bowie, it wasn't just about image, it was using this persona as a way to explore and reshape reality. Ozzy Osbourne, like I mentioned before, He leaned into the shock value. His song, Mr. Crowley, played upon the spooky, mysterious vibe and helped cement Crowley's place in rock mythology. And even Iron Maiden gave him nods in songs about mysticism and the occult. Punk bands they enjoyed his anti-authoritarian energy, and rock artists more into the depth of his philosophy. Crowley's influence shows up all over music, just in different ways. Sometimes as a rebellious icon, other times as a symbol of creative freedom. But Crowley's influence was far beyond music. His ideas about consciousness were, at the same time, influencing academic research in the psychology and neuroscience. Scientists studied altered states of consciousness, were rediscovering techniques that Crowley had been doing since 1890. Specifically, researchers in creativity and peak performance found that his methods for achieving a magical consciousness that he writes about in many of his books was wildly similar to what academics would call in modern times the flow state. And the human potential of the 1970s and 80s, you could argue, was borrowing heavily from some of Crowley's techniques, often without acknowledgement, right? I mean, like rebirth therapy and a bunch of different new age practices used the same psychological methods that Crowley had developed for his magical initiations. The idea that you could completely transform your personality through these intensive experiential workshops came from his magical curriculum. And the internet age has only expanded Crowley's reach. I mean, online communities focused on chaos magic and art and self-transformation ideas often treat him like a foundational figure.
I didn't go into everything of the NeverEnding Story.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to focus on the Do What Thou Wilt.
Yeah.
And also the Gmork character.
Yeah.
That's Gmork. Yeah.
Gmork is the wolf. Yeah.
Right. Where the nothing and them. That's more of the religious.
Mm-hmm.
The very legalist.
Yeah.
And if you look at that, you said it, these. It's not when people say religious. It's not. You can't just look at we think of it Christianity.
Yeah.
No, it's the people the people in the 70s or the 60s who were upset. And we talked about this before. A lot of people in the 60s were kind of rebelling against the 50s, or even the 40s/50s, right, where religion had kind of had a hold.
Yeah,
I would say legalism.
Yeah,
and then they become the legalists themselves, just in a totally different way.
Yeah,
where now they're telling you this is what's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just, again, it's a pendulum that's swinging back and forth. So that's why conservatism isn't a good thing if you don't, if you can serve ideas without having the spirit behind it, you miss the point. Right? And if you're free, if you get freedom and you forget why you're free and how you got free, you miss the point.
Yeah.
And now you want to stay free and do whatever you want, you miss the point, right? So you have this thing that goes back and forth because it's all dead. And that's kind of what they're talking about, but they think that they're going to experience this thing. You know how Aleister Crowley died?
I forget. It had something to do with a ritual, right?
He was on drugs. Dude was a drug addict. Because he was using drugs to get into these spiritual states.
Right.
So he just died miserable. He died miserable. He didn't have a great death. He didn't die. He died poor.
Didn't transcend into this magical knowledge.
No, all the stuff, dude was broke.
Yeah.
He was relying on rich people to give him money.
But he ended up losing all of his funding because he was just so out there that people started disassociating with him.
Well, yeah, not just that. He had other issues that happened, but
yeah.
That was another thing I didn't put in there. A guy died.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Somebody died from sepsis or something during one of the rituals, during one of the sex rituals.
Yeah, from drinking blood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he went through a lot in that way where he lost a lot of backing. And he just was out there, and eventually he needs the drugs to be able to get into these altered states.
Or he just needs them because now he's an addict.
Yeah, that's the other part of it.
Right.
But when you see it leads to depravity, it leads to nothing.
Yeah.
And it's sad because I heard when he was dying, he said, "Oh my God, what have I done?"
No,
that was Anton LaVey.
Yeah.
That's a different guy.
He did say something.
Oh, okay.
Somebody look up. What did Aleister Crowley say on his deathbed? He did say something.
Oh, so that was Anton LaVey that said that. Oh, they were both evil.
He said, "I am perplexed. Satan, get out."
Yeah.
Aleister Crowley his reported last words on his deathbed were, "I am perplexed. Satan, get out."
So that's kind of interesting, right?
Satan, get out.
That he said that. Those were his last words.
Maybe he saw who was coming for him in the room. You know how the little boy saw Jesus in that viral clip?
Yeah.
And saw his dad? Maybe he was saying, "Wait, I'm confused. Why is Satan here?"
And then Anton LaVey, same thing.
Yeah.
He said some out there stuff too. So you're doing all this stuff and it's for nothing.
Yeah.
It's funny. The nothing.
The nothing.
You're doing all this and it's actually it leads to nothing. And you think you're doing this working. It's so funny that they call them workings, right?
Yeah.
Babylon working, like these magical workings.
Yeah.
And they just lead to
Nothing.
I just want to say that one of the most traumatizing scenes of my childhood was watching Artax die in that swamp.
And he's like,
he's trying to pull him out. Yeah.
Yeah. And then wasn't that after then he meets the turtle?
Yes.
Like weird.
He was there ready to die.
Yeah. And the only reason why we know this so well is because we were forced to watch it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mom.